tournament turned into 3.5 months in Hong Kong and traveling around Asia coaching the national team. And that went, until late September, and then came home, relaxed, went through the holidays and stuff. And then a team that I had worked with over in Europe, they said, well, we're getting our pitchers ready for the season. Can you come out preseason, say January, February or whatever, and work with the pitchers? So then I ended up going January and February out to Europe and coaching this team in their preseason work, and then came back 2 days before the high school season started, and then finished that up. But
so you were in Hong Kong with the USA national team?
no, it was the Hong Kong national team.
Oh, really? Did you guys play the US at all?
We
Like
played,
any US teams? Or what age group was it?
They brought me over to coach the university level, which there was like a university level world championship, which was played in Taiwan. So the USA team was actually just Kansas University. Their whole club just came out and represented USA for the tournament.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so that tournament was it was Hong Kong, Taiwan, Japan, Korea, USA, Czech Republic, a few other teams I can't remember off the
Because
top.
I had a coach out there. Do you know the name Nelson Gord?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So he's the head recruiter for NCSA for baseball, but he was out there actually in like Taiwan or Hong Kong coaching a high school aged USA team. And so that's why I was wondering what age group you were coaching. That would have been funny if you guys were working together.
Yeah, because we with the Hong Kong team, it was the University World Champion. The initials for that is FISU, so it was like the FISU World Championship. And then they asked me to stay for the under 18 Asian Championship, which was played in Japan. And then I coached, and I was also, palling around with the guy it was a Canadian guy who was the head coach for the senior national team, and I was his assistant / pitching coach. So that one, we had a small tournament called the East Asia Cup, which was played in Hong Kong, and then that led up to the Asian Games, which was a really good time.
Man, that sounds awesome. So it sounds like you have a lot of games that you coached in then. And so, like, in those games that you're coaching, I'm sure they all weren't equally, you weren't facing equally talented teams. So sometimes you were facing a team that probably should have, on a good day, beat you 10 out of 10, and on their bad day, beat you like 6 out of 10. But like, how do you, going back to that original question about like getting kids to play to their abilities, with all the games that you coach, what's one of the ways that you use, or one of the strategies you use to help them play to their ability and play to their potential?
Well, this is something that kind of it's something that you have to sort of project yourself almost into the past over this, because I mean my experience has been, at some point in time, having gone through what these guys are going through, but to say, okay, I'm facing an opponent I'm clearly overmatched, and how do you reconcile that? How do you deal with it? So for me, I would see players, and they're clearly, you can just see that there's a vibe like they're just terrified. And so a lot of it's just trying to sort of lend some level of confidence to them by, being some words to say, here's what's going to happen, because, you can more or less map it out for these guys, what's going to go on, and then say, we could react this way, or we could react that way. And, you frame it so that clearly you want them to react positively. So, that's some of the words. And then also in in an intangible sort of sense, you have to kind of lead by example. So, if for instance you're playing a team that's a lot stronger than you, and you're competing with them for a while, you could play a team that's they're going to blow you out, but for the first 2 or 3 innings, you're hanging with them. And so, you know, I've been around other coaches that aren't very good at this, where they'll be in a situation like that, and they start to think, well, maybe we got a shot at this, and then inevitably what happens is that a player will make a mistake, and not a mistake of, oh, I was scared or anything, but it's just like it's the probabilities of baseball. You make an error, or you make a bad pitch, or something like this, and coaches will be like, oh my god, geez, oh no, like the whole bottom just fell out of everything. And so that all, you know, filters down to your players. If the players turn around and see you freaking out because a guy dropped a ground ball, they're going to be like, oh my God, if he can't even keep it together, what chance do we have? That sort of thing. So, but the original premise or reason why this was brought up as the question you asked me was just because I've found myself coaching a lot of teams like the Hong Kong club, or the Czech national team, and those guys will go into tournaments, both of them very similar situations and results. They'll go into tournaments where they're probably if it's an 8-team tournament, they're in the bottom 4, but they've got to play every team. So for instance, we're in the Asian games with the Hong Kong senior team, and we're playing against Japan, and they're like in that realm, in that point in time, that's the best in the world showing up. Japan,
Mm-hmm.
Korea, they're going to battle it out to see who wins the gold medal at the Asian Games. And, we're going to face Japan and probably get mercy ruled after 5 innings. And then we'll turn around the next day and play Thailand. And we'll have, fairly equal game, could go one way or the other type thing. And there's a noticeable difference between how these guys play and go about their business, just from body language, from energy, from the way that they're, interacting with themselves, with each other, and all that sort of thing. So,
because they think they have like a chance before
right, exactly.
they even go in there. Whereas when they
Exactly.
play Japan, they're like, we're already beat. Like,
Well, yeah,
it's such a psychological, such a psychological game right there.
And I mean, it's something, especially for pitching. It's like, well, I imagine it's same for hitters too, but I don't have too much experience with a bat in my hand. However, if you go out there and you are facing a guy that if you throw it anywhere near the plate, he's going to blast one to the moon, it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's not like you're just psyching yourself out thinking about it. You're just like, this is, I mean, borderline physically dangerous sometimes even. But also it's just, when you're pitching, it's like you're dead in the center of the field. Everybody's watching. The whole thing rides, and it's instant feedback as to whether or not success and failure, it right then. It's not like you're going to go, okay, I'm going to put my chip on the table and come back in an hour and find out whether or not I won or lost. It's like, no. So
Yeah.
those
that kind of makes me think of like Anthony Joshua versus Andy Ruiz, the boxing championship, and how Ruiz was supposedly incredibly overmatched. He was shorter. He didn't have as long of a reach. He seemed more out of shape than the other guy. The other guy just seemed like Anthony Joshua just looked like the Hulk almost next to him. This Adonis of a person, and then he gets beat. And you have to have that mentality, I guess, as Andy Ruiz, just be like, you know what, screw it. Like, they're gonna go in, and we're supposed to lose this, but I'm gonna give my best. or even like Coastal Carolina when they won the national championship. They just went in there like, hey man, like we probably shouldn't be on the field with these guys, but we're here, and you know what, screw it, we're just going to go out and we're going to play. And I think that's kind of the magic words right there, screw it, to get you out of that anxiety or fearful mindset, especially in the game of sport.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of coping mechanisms for this, I mean, the first one that is the easiest is exactly what you're saying. Just be like, yeah, fuck it, let's just go, you know.
Yeah, for sure. What's another one that you can think of?
Well, the other one, and again, it's there's when I'm going to preface it by saying when we talk of the sports psychology side of things, there is a reasoned intellectual conversation that happens. And then when the game's on, the heat's on, the adrenaline's flowing, all bets are off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So part of this is like this thing anybody can on an intellectual level understand. Experience wise, it depends on the person, I suppose. But the next one of it is just if you it's a preamble to the whole screw it, let's go type thing, is to say if you consider at the end of the game, end of the match, what have you, okay, I'm going up against somebody who's supposedly I'm overmatched and I have no chance of winning the game, and they're, you know, talent wise or time and effort wise, they've done more, they're higher up, etc. Now the thought of that is to say, all right, so at the end of the game, how would you feel if you said, okay, this team's way better than I am, but I went out there and I was so scared and I was so tight that I didn't perform and I got beat. Contrast that to these guys are overmatched against us, but I've been practicing what I do, so I'm just going to say fuck it and go do that. I may still lose by 10 runs, but if I'm walking off the field just saying, you know what, I was scared and I was tight and I didn't even perform like I know I could, then I'd feel terrible about that. I want to avoid that. Versus if I'm, you know, if I just say, well, you know what, I've been going out and throwing my bullpens and I know how to throw a pitch here and throw a curveball there, and I'm just going to go out and throw it. Mm-hmm. And let's see if they hit it or if they don't, you know, and then at the end of the game, you're like, well, I went out there and put my cards on the table. They just had better cards. So I can walk away with some, you know, with my head up from that. But
yeah, that makes me think of the quote by Dwight D. Eisenhower when he's like, everything we could think of has been done. The troops are fit. Everybody's doing his best. The answer is now in the lap of the gods. And I feel like that's very similar to what you're saying. Like he's, you know, Dwight D. Eisenhower, he did everything to prepare, but as soon as you get out there in the heat of battle, you know, like let the cards fall where they may type of thing. And at the end of the day, would you rather leave it up to chance or leave it up to like your preparation? If you go out there and you haven't prepared and you know that you have not put in the work, and you know that of course these guys are overmatched, they've worked harder than us, they've done all this stuff and it's focused on them. Whereas if you go back to focusing on you and it's like, all right, like I know I've put in the preparation, I know that I can play to this level, so now it's up to me to play to
well, now that's also another factor in the whole equation, though, is that have you prepared? So maybe that's part of what is our adding to the mix of this. How do you perform against teams that are overmatched? Is, you know, you if you don't have preparation to fall back on, you can't very well say, you know, hey, I prepared. Let me just go out there and play and see what happens. But if you
yeah.
go, I'm not ready for this. well, then, you're going to have to clean your underwear in the first inning. You know what I mean? So,
That kind of makes me think there's an amateur golfer I work with who going into it was 2 weeks until his last tournament of the year. And he just had, with his work, with his actual job going on and the things he had going on in his life outside of golf, he just hadn't had time to practice as much as he wanted to. And he's like, well, I guess these next 2 weeks I can really hammer home practice. And I look at him and I'm like, okay, honestly, as an athlete, if I knew I didn't practice for like a month or a month and a half, and then I crammed in practice the last 2 weeks, the first hole or two, I might go out there and I might hit a good shot. But then as soon as one shot goes bad, my brain is going to go right to, man, this is because I only had 2 weeks of practice. I'm like,
yeah,
so
it's not an algebra test. You can cram and then show up and get through it with, short-term memory, if you will. But
hmm so what we did was he's been meditating every day.
uh-huh.
And so I said, how many shots are there? And it was a 2-round competition. So, 100, and I think it was a 72 shot. That was par, and he wanted to shoot even or
Mm-hmm.
like right under even. So I was like, okay, if you just take a breath before every shot, you take a conscious, intentional breath to help you get into a relaxed body, calm mind state. Do you think you would play better? He's like, if I did that consciously and intentionally, yes, I think that's where I could probably pull some confidence from, because he knows he hadn't put in the physical practice of the game, but he had
Mm-hmm.
put in the breath work and the ability to stay present and, get into that calm mind, relaxed body state so that he could have the best chance at hitting the ball well. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what we made our goal into. Instead of hitting a good shot and shooting par, we're like, hey, let's just do 144 intentional conscious breaths. And so that wound up working out a little better than if you were like, okay, let me cram in these 2 weeks. Kind of like you said, it's not an algebra test, and you have to put in the work.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you don't, what happens? I mean, you just aren't that good, for one.
Well, yeah, I mean, and and what we're talking about too is it's present, and things happen like this because, I mean, especially as soon as you start getting into professional ranks, then if it's your profession, then you have equal amount of time to train and practice as anybody that you're going to face. But I mean, I'll give you my example that brought up this whole thing. When I was with the Hong Kong team, because space is so limited there, they had one baseball field, and since it was owned by the city, the time that they could use it was limited. So I would be in the middle of bullpens with 5 or 6 different pitchers rotating through, and then they'd sound an alarm and turn the lights off because the field was closed. And I still had 2 more pitchers to get throwing. Now, contrast that where we we went to Japan for 4 or 5 days to play some university Japanese team just to have some game experience before the tournament. So we practiced with them, and it was 2 hours plus of just the most. If you would imagine a highly disciplined army that played baseball, that was this Japanese university, and they did 2.5 hours plus of practice, and then we played our game. And my guys were wore out just from the pre-game practice, and then we went and played a full 7 or 8 innings or whatever we ended up with. So if you say, well, I haven't practiced as much as that team, they have more talented players than we do. How do you reconcile that? And that's the question that brought us here in the first place. So
Mm-hmm.
um, so yeah, it's a difficult one to pinpoint, but I'm sure that there's like a set of methods or thoughts or ways that you could at least get yourself into the right state of mind when you go into that situation.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it has a lot to do with your like going back to this whole preparation thing about how like it's got to come back to your training. But you're saying that like that they just don't have the hours of practice like the Japanese kids do.
Right.
So then it's how do we make this practice as quality as possible? Or maybe that's just not even possible, and maybe it's like it comes down to a geological thing. Like you're just living in the wrong area.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's some of that, and and I'm not. I'm sure there's some of it in other sports where, but baseball is such a skill game that um, the ones who start younger just have an advantage. So we had a kid who was he was from Hong Kong, but like his mother or his father was Japanese, and so he spent time living in Japan and played baseball there. And he was just so much above the rest of his teammates. And that sort of thing is part of what gets you the confidence. So, and I don't know, the examples that we're talking about, I don't know how much of it is just like um, we're talking about how we feel after we get beaten by an opponent who's clearly much more advanced than we are.
Hmm.
It's like given the circumstances of team's ability to train or access to quality coaching, just in terms of time and resources, then if you're going into a game that you're going to get beaten either way pretty badly, what what we're talking about is just making these guys feel better about it, I guess. I don't know.
Hmm. So what's the mindset then that you try to instill in your guys like afterwards? Because you know that they should probably lose. They know that they should probably lose. So what do you say to them afterwards or maybe right before to get them into like the kind of experimenter's mindset or the learning mindset so that they do come out of it with something?
Well, I really some different sort of tools or strategies, if you will. Um, it's like what we spoke of before, where you have to, as a coach, you have to keep your cool, because if something goes bad in the game and then they see how it affects you, then they're all going to fall apart behind you. But if you just are are able to just be like, okay, that happens in baseball. I've seen it before. Let's, we can keep going. We're fine, et cetera, et cetera. Then that tends to, you know, it gives the players a little bit more of a boost. I think, I've had that before where coaches that I've been around, where if you go out and you make a mistake in the game, like if I'm pitching, I give up a couple runs, come back in the dugout and I'm sitting there and I'm upset with myself because I gave up the runs. And then I look to my coach, and my coach is so equally upset about the situation, whether it's, for me or for his own, because he wanted to win and I'm not performing for him so that he can win. If it's selfish reasons or if it's for me, if I look at my coach and my coach is like, oh, geez, yeah, and they're visibly, shaken, then you're like, oh, well, then your whole energy just drops from there.
Hmm.
Versus, like, I can recall one time I was playing, it was a AAA game. My manager was Chris Chambliss. I don't know if you know the name. he played in the big leagues for a long time. He's a veteran guy, played for the Yankees, played for a bunch of different teams. And I just remembered one game where it was like that. I went out in the first inning, I gave up a couple runs, I kind of put my glove down, I was really upset, and I'm like, and he's sitting next to me, and I just looked over and I'm like, dang, Chris, man, I just, really upset me and that. And he just looked at me, had a big old smile on his face, and he just was like, that's okay, baby. That's all he said to me. I'm like, it's okay, let's go.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
just back out there, and it's maybe that's sums it up, just
Hmm.
in what's the best strategy that you can use with something like this is just to smile, say it's okay, baby,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
I mean, and the other thing I did too, I was with the under 18 kids in Hong Kong. So we go to Japan, and our first game against is against the Japanese, and it was in a full-on major league sized Japanese baseball stadium, which held probably about 40,000 fans, and there was 3 to 4,000 in the house to watch that game, and it was, you know, easily probably like 20 times if you took the 20 biggest crowds these kids have ever played in front of and put them all together, it wouldn't match what was in the stands that day. So I mean, I walked out to the mound because our starting pitcher somehow managed to get the first three batters of the game out. So he put up a 0 in the first inning, and then after that it just fell apart because they just started hitting him around because the Japanese kids were really good. But in the middle of that, I'm going to go out to the mound and talk to him. And I mean, I walked out to the mound, and this kid who was probably like 16 or 17, his eyes are this big, his hands are going like this, and and at that point you're just going, well, how do I, what can I do to add to the situation here rather than making things worse or whatever. And so at that point I just was like, in a somewhat version of it's okay, baby, was, I told him, I said, hey, look, take a breath. Yeah. I said, take a look around. Look at all these people. Look at how many people are here. This is Look around. Just take it in. Just it's an experience because if you're put in a situation at 16, 17 years old where your hands are going like this, I mean, that's, you gotta snap somebody out of that somehow. And so my visit was partially, it's okay, everything's going to be fine. And then the other one was just like, don't let this experience not be experienced. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Just, I mean, if anything else, you're going to be
that's
like
good.
like a remembrance of that, because and you draw on whatever sort of strategies and techniques that are learned, book learning, if you will. Plus you come up with some experiential type stuff in situations like that too, where like I'm walking out there going, I know what this kid's feeling right now because I remember feeling that. And sometimes you get really tunnel vision, you get to where you can't feel parts of your body, like all this weird stuff is going on. And just to get somebody to be able to just be there, because when your hands are going like this and your eyes are this big, sometimes you're just like, I got to get out of here. It's total fight or flight. And if you could just snap them out of that for a split second, just say, you know what, take a breath, take a look around. And as as my coach at Pepperdine used to say to us, if this is the worst thing that ever happens to you, guess what, you're going to have a pretty good life.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
so
And so that sounds like, I mean, it sounds more like you're you're getting him out of that moment. You're trying to snap him out of that. So I would say that's more like crisis management, right? Where
well, yeah.
this kid is in you know, he looks like he's in over his head. He's not even experiencing the experience, which I love those words, by the way. I think that was good. Like, I mean, I've heard Eric Burns talk about, the MLB Network host. I've heard him talk about how when he went out there in when the A's were about to break the win streak, the all-time MLB win streak, and like he was the first guy up in that inning, and he winds up striking out and in front of 40,000 people. But he said before he even stepped in that box, he just kind of sat there and was like, wow, this is cool. And he looked around and he got to experience it, and he was present with the moment. He wound up striking out, but the next guy, you know, hit a bomb, and that was history.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, so yeah, experiencing the experience, that's a very high level thing that I think is really cool. So in terms of crisis prevention though, like before this kid gets out there and experiences this, like what is like one tool or strategy that you would try and get him to practice outside of the game on his own, so that when he gets into that moment, he already knows what to do?
Well, this is something that I don't know. Uh, I don't know how many coaches or people like us are able to do this sort of thing, but I remember when I pitched in the big leagues a little bit, like a few weeks worth of major league time pitching for Detroit, and occasionally, you know, like I got called up in the middle of the season, got sent back down. Occasionally, people will say, you know, oh, do you wish you'd done anything different, or could have things have gone another way, or this or that? and and my answer was that the only thing that I wish would have happened differently was to have somebody, and here's the key, somebody with credibility to just take you aside and say, this is what's going to happen. So, for instance, if somebody was, and even just like little things, so that you can go, okay, I'm sort of grounded here. I'm comfortable. I knew that this was going to happen, so it happened, and now I can be in the game, in the moment type thing. Like, you know, like even little tiny things. Like if somebody would have said to me, okay, when you get called up to the big leagues, you're going to get phone calls from dudes you went to high school with that you hadn't talked to for 10 years. You're going to go get a haircut, and the woman cutting your hair is going to be like, hey, you pitching for the Tigers tonight? You better win. You're like, what? You know, it's just stuff that doesn't normally happen to you normally. And if somebody said, hey, you know, and what else is going to happen is that you're going to go in there, and the media guy is going to want to talk to you while you're putting your pants on. What? Okay. Oh, and by the way, you know, the A, B, C, D, like these are the things that are going to happen. Oh, you remember that guy that when you got his baseball card, you were really, really excited because it was a really good baseball card and you're a collector? Yeah, that's going to be the first guy you get to face when you're in the big leagues. What? Like, I got your baseball card. Now he's got a bat in his hand trying to smash one off you. You know, and I mean, it sounds simple, but and sort of maybe trivial or meaningless, but when somebody tells you, okay, guess what? People are going to come out of the woodwork and want to talk to you and congratulate you and blah blah blah. Like it changes your mentality. If you're not expecting that, you're like, Jesus, what the hell's this guy calling me about? Oh, well, they're just happy for you because you got called up to the major leagues. Not many people get to do that. Or if you know, so to go back to the point, I think pre this sort of thing is if you say, look, here's how it's going to work out. Here's what's going to happen. And then what that does is it allows the player to experience the moment. One, it allows them to stay in their game, which is where you want them to be. You don't want them to go, oh my God, I used to collect that dude's baseball card. Now you're squeezing the ball this tight. You'd be like, oh yeah, that dude, I remember. Let me get his ass, right?
Yeah.
So or if you say, hey, listen, you guys are going to play against Japan. They're the number one ranked team in the world. You're ranked number 99. So what's going to happen is that these dudes, whatever you're throwing up, they're probably going to be able to hit it in the gap or out of the ballpark. So, if they do, just keep your head up, pop your chest out, get the ball back, and just keep going. Don't let them see anything different than if we were playing over on the playground. And there's going to be a crowd, and they're going to be going crazy, and they're going to scream and yell and beat on the drums at you. And this is going to happen. This is going to happen. Just take it all in, boys. Just take it all in. And you know what? At the end of the game, whatever the scoreboard says, you're going to be able to say, I went out there, I enjoyed it, I did all of what I trained myself to do, and you can walk around with your head up the rest of the day, the rest of the time, because you're not going to be like, I was so scared, I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what was going to happen, and I was, that's how dudes get to be superstitious.
Yeah. That's
it's
true.
like, I'm not prepared, I don't know what's going to happen, I better get a rabbit's foot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, being superstitious, it helps, it's a thing, but it's like, what if you can't find your rabbit's foot? Are you screwed then, or what? No,
I say
you're
that all
not.
the time.
You're not. But and that's to me, that's one of those things that just and I only say because at a certain level, anybody could walk up and say, hey, just enjoy yourself, it's going to be great, and you're like, you have no idea what I'm about to go into. But if I was friends with a major league player or an ex-major league player, and they said, yeah, here's usually how it goes, because I've been through this before, then when they tell you that and you're like, oh, okay. So then when the reporter comes to talk to you, you're like, oh, this is when he was telling me about the reporter coming.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still focused on what I'm trying to do. I knew this was coming, so that I incorporated it into my whole scheme of game day preparation.
Yeah,
I
and
mean, there's two pieces to the puzzle. One of them is leading up to it. The other one is on the actual day of the event, because you can do a miniature version of a cramming for a test, if you will, on the day of the game, or at least how to prepare for an event, whether it's a golf tournament or a baseball game or a boxing match or whatever. You've played a game before, so you know how to prepare yourself for a game. The other stuff is all just window dressing. But if having some fancy window dressing throws you off your game, then that's a problem. But
mm-hmm.
if you go, okay, I know we've been practicing with this plain old window, but we're going to go to a different house to play this game, and they're going to have fancy curtains. Don't worry about it. Just go and play the game. It's like
Yeah.
that you can do on the day of the event, and also leading up to it, of course, if you have somebody to just say, listen, here's what's going to happen. So
yeah, and I think the research behind that goes back to kind of, there's this model of self-confidence. Ben Dura came up with it as the researcher. And what it says is that there's kind of 4 ways to build self-confidence or self-efficacy. And one is like your performance accomplishments. So like going out and actually doing it, and or the past experiences that you might have. And then vicarious experiences. So like seeing somebody else do it. And then you have the social persuasion, which I think is what you just hit on, which is like your coaches telling you stuff and kind of giving you feedback. And then your physiological and emotional states. But so the one that you just hit on, I think, is the social persuasion, where like you're telling them what to expect, and
Mhm.
that's giving them the confidence that that everybody's kind of searching for. You know, at the end of the day, the mental game is all about how can I bolster the most confidence
Sure,
for my
sure.
game. But
And that's
that's a
why
huge one.
also when I brought that up, I added to have somebody with credibility come and tell you that, because that is somebody taking you aside and saying, hey, calm down, it's going to be cool, you're going to go out and there are going to be fans there, there's going to be this and that, and you're like, you've never been
You
through
don't
this.
understand.
Now that actually might even push you in the other direction and instill more doubt to it.
Freak
But
you out even more.
yeah, so
That makes me think of when I was in college pitching at Indiana State. My freshman year, I was the first out of the pen, and I come out against Dallas Baptist, and I get out of the first inning, go out for the second inning, get the first two outs quick. Third out, my second baseman throws it into the stands, and then I get a duck snort, and then I walk a guy, and my coach comes out, and he tells me to take a breath, and that's kind of how he started. So I take a breath, and I had never trained my breath before, so I
mhm.
didn't know what it was going to do, but it instantly sucked me into the present moment. And all of a sudden, I could feel the adrenaline pumping through my body, and I could feel my heart beating, and I could literally hear my heart beating, and I was like, oh my god. And that kind of freaked me out more than anything. And I think if you would have followed it up with, hey man, like, look at where you're at, because literally Dallas Baptist Field is beautiful, and in left field they have this huge cannon. It's awesome. And if you would have followed up, take a breath with, all right, now look around, like look at where you're at, like regardless of what happens after you throw this next pitch or whatever, uh, like this is pretty cool. You know, I think that would have helped me a little bit more than just telling me to take a breath, because he goes, take a breath. The game looks like it's speeding up on you a little bit. And that, I mean, just made me, I feel like, even more freaked out. I wasn't even aware of how pumped up I was before that, but then I would definitely was, and I don't think that necessarily helped the situation that much. Um,
It sounds similar to what I told the kid when we were playing the Japanese. Just take a breath, look around at all this stuff. I mean, isn't this the field's beautiful? We got a bunch of fans here. I go, what about that girl in the third row? Check that out, huh? Yeah, she's waiting for you, man. She's waiting for you. She don't care, like that kind of just something to, break out of the you
yeah,
know,
the game, that tunnel vision that you were bringing up,
yeah, it's like
because
you're,
that does happen.
you're on the last tick of the roller coaster just before it drops you off, and you're just like, whoa, but it's like, no, no.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
there's all
I would say
things.
that's huge though. Just kind of like wrapping up that question, like with having credibility, someone with credibility, that makes, I would say that makes a huge difference, because it's kind of like that lady that's giving you the haircut, and she's like, oh, you better win. Or it could be the same thing though if she says, oh, like, hey, you'll go out there and you'll do great, like, she doesn't know what it's like at all. So to value her opinion at all is, one, hard
Yeah,
not to do, but two, it doesn't, like, it doesn't really matter what she says. Or but then again, that's hard for us to take in
well,
if
yeah,
you haven't been told before that that's going to happen.
yeah, and stuff like that. I mean, you get a vibe whether it's just somebody genuinely encouraging you and that sort of thing, and then if there's somebody who's just like they they are completely on the outside of it and just you know they tell you, it's almost like if you're in a relationship and somebody who's not in a relationship in that relationship is like, well, why don't you just buy her some flowers or something like that? You're like, you don't know what you're talking about. Get out of here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And it's part of the fun of coaching is just to be able to try and read what's going on and seeing what what card can you pull out of your hand and play on this situation that would allow them to, find some way to excel? I guess that's the whole point of this assignment as a coach, is just to say, how do I get this horse to run really fast?
Hmm. And then how do I get it to run fast when it's supposed to run fast?
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course.
So yeah, that's a really good point there too. I like that analogy. Like as a coach, you got to figure out, okay, like I got these different cards in my hand right now. Like which one do I play to get him to play his best right
Yeah,
now?
yeah.
And that's so true. That brings me back to when I was coaching a high school travel team, and there was a lefty on the mound that this kid was 87, 88, funky mechanics. So, he was, when he was on, he was unhittable. And
Pitching for you or the
yeah,
other team?
pitching for me. And this
Uh,
was one of the days where he was unhittable because he was walking guys. And I go out there and I just tell him, hey, because I just read this research article about this lady who, when people were in times of struggle, all they have to tell themselves is, I'm back. And you just say, I'm back. And that reaffirms in your mind that, like, you're back to who you can be. And so I go out there and I tell him to say I'm back, and he looks at me like I'm crazy. He's like, "You want me to say it out loud?" I'm like, "Yeah, say it out loud." And he's like, "I'm back." And I'm like, "Now say it again, but a little louder, so that Mike over there at shortstop can hear you." He's like, "I'm back," and I'm like, "Mike, did you hear him?" He's like, "What?" And then I'm like, "Say it again." He goes, "I'm back." And then the rest of the game, he only had like 2 more innings left, and he absolutely diced. And so that's like one of those good moments where you're like, oh man, like it worked, you know?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I mean, I always say to these guys, like the phrase I use a lot is just stay in your game, because everybody has their their groove where I feel comfortable. I can perform what I need to perform. I'm not. Other things aren't throwing me off here. So that's the whole idea. And I'm like, if there's a guy who, you know, he's pitching well and then he gets a ground ball and it goes through the guy's legs, and now he's stomping around the mound. He's a different cat, and I'm like, hey, stay in your game now. Stay in your game, because it's again like that. You have your cards that you can play as a coach. You have, you know, whatever strategies that you know of, whatever experience that you can draw from, and then just say, how do we get this guy to stay in his game?
mm,
You know, it can be either uh, putting your foot on the gas or taking your foot off the gas, or however you can do. I mean, there was a one time I was coaching this guy, and I basically intentionally tried to provoke him to fight me in the dugout. You know,
interesting.
yeah, and it was like some way to snap the dude out of it, because I don't know if it was cumulative, or if I just got the sense in the moment that it just being, a friend coach type thing, or just trying to say, hey, it's okay, baby, like that kind of thing. It wasn't happening, right? So um, so and also our team was in the middle of a pretty lengthy losing streak, so I kind of wanted to, shake up the whole dugout, but it was like he went out in the first couple innings, gave up some runs, and then just was making good pitches, and occasionally wouldn't get a call. And he was the kind of guy who, if the umpire didn't get the call right, he would lose his mind. And
Hmm.
so he's out there just like, come on, like throwing his hands up, showing up the umpire, all this kind of crap. And so he gives up a couple runs. The umpire misses a couple calls. He comes back in the dugout. He's getting a drink of water. I walk over towards him, and he's like, don't, dude. I don't want to talk about it. That's what he said. And so I was like, good, because I don't want you to talk. You're going to listen to what I have to say right now. I said, I'm
Beautiful.
fucking tired of sitting here watching you complain and piss and moan over every single pitch that you miss by an inch or that. If you throw the pitch and he doesn't call it, throw it again. Jesus, what the hell? And he's like, and he turns to me and goes, oh, I threw this pitch and he didn't call it. I threw that pitch, he didn't call it. And I go, I took out the pitch counter and I shoved it in his face and I said, you've thrown 75 pitches already. How many have you missed? And then it was like, and then however it went, next thing you know, they're pulling us apart.
Dang, man.
And then I'm just like, I don't even want to fucking look at you. I'm out of here. And I went down to the bullpen, but I was laughing all the way down. I'm like, oh, that was perfect. That was perfect. Because like now, like the other team was looking at our dugout going, what the hell's going on over there? You know, the bullpen's like looking down because they were, you know, not too far down the track. And it was just like, you know, sometimes you just gotta just shake somebody, I guess. I don't know.
I completely agree. And I was just thinking, I was talking about that the other day with one of my friends, is how a lot of people say like, oh, you shouldn't get angry, or anger is a bad emotion, you know, but controlled anger is needed in order to make a change sometimes. You know, if you don't kind of have that controlled aggression like you just did with that player, then he doesn't know that what he's doing is bad. You know, there are other ways to go about it, you know, but like that was the one that you chose in that moment. And it's not that you were actually like seeing red, out of control, angry, but you were like, I'm going to do this with this intention, you know?
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, he put up a good 5 or 6 innings more after that and didn't complain about the umpire either. So, you know, it's you know, I tell my catchers, the analogy I use with my catchers is that I say, look, you're the jockey and that's your horse out there. So you have to know, you want to get him to the finish line in first place. You have to know when you have to go, come on, baby, come on. Or when you go, you got to whip the guy and get him to go, you know. So
yeah,
sometimes you got to whip the horse to get him to run faster. Sometimes you just got to, you know.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I just heard I was listening to this millionaire successful businessman talk the other day, and he goes, a good business has a carrot and a stick. And I thought, I'm like, man, what does that mean? But then he explained it. He's like, a carrot is what you kind of hold out in front of the person to motivate them to go, right? That's that positive reinforcement. But then the stick is in the back hitting them to also get them to go. And you need both to have a successful business, and you need both to, you know, be a successful catcher, like you just said.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, you know, and that's the challenge of coaching, is that you just have to be able to draw on all these sorts of things and then know when to use them, you know. And it's like I have another one where, you know, I went out to the mound as a pitching coach and the guy's getting hit around or whatever, and I just wanted to calm things down and to go the completely opposite direction. I walked out to the mound one time and I just stood there. This was like just looking around. I didn't say a word. Just stood there for a good 30 or 45 seconds. And not a word was said. It was me, the pitcher, and the catcher. Finally, the catcher just goes, all right, let's get two. He walked back, and that was it. You know, and it was like, he just went on and pitched the way it was, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. All right, let's get two.
Yeah. And then, and it, you know, it just seemed like sometimes, you know, you can see it coming. Sometimes you're just like, all right, I'm almost past the foul line to go talk to him. What can I say at this point in time, right? So, yeah, so sometimes it comes to you. Sometimes you have an idea what you want to do, but I think the whole point of it is just to get people to be in their game. And, you know, our original conversation here was that facing teams that are clearly much better than you are talent-wise or you know, time that they're able to work wise can be intimidating and that intimidation can knock you out of your game. And, you know, you don't want to let that happen regardless of what the outcome is going to be. You want the outcome to be, well, I played my game and I got beat. Then you can keep your chin up. If you say, well, I got beat because I don't even know, I couldn't feel my hands and I was all nervous and I didn't even play like I knew I could play. I like even if even if even if I would have gotten hit around, I know I didn't make good pitches because I was, in my own head or something. So that's what brought us here, because that's the thing that came to my mind when you wrote me the message, was just like, okay, you need to figure out a way to still stay in your game and be competitive if you're facing a team that's, number one in the world and you're on the team that's number 99 in the world. So
Yeah. And there's I'm sure we could keep going here on different ways to go, but I want to keep this at an hour. So
yeah, we're getting there. It's easy
yeah,
to
but
keep going with it.
yeah, I think what's your number one takeaway from our little chat here?
I think the number one is probably like when we were talking about there's there's different there's different moments where this needs to be and can be addressed. So like we're talking about, you're a golfer who hadn't been able to prepare as much. Okay, so that's the same thing as these players who they haven't had the same amount of practice time that a Japanese team has had. So they're right away, they're like, well, I'm not ready for this. So that's like well in advance of the competition, you can start planting the seeds of like, okay, this is what's going to happen. So you can address it, pre-event in advance. You can address it during the event, either immediately before, during, and immediately after, like in the real time. And then also afterwards, you can sort of do a post-mortem and kind of an analysis that would, steer the players in the right direction, whichever.
And if you set it up correctly, it seems like it would be a little bit less emotional too then, and you'd be able to look at it a little bit more objectively, since you have set them up pre-game with saying like, hey, this is probably what's going to happen here.
Yeah. These are some of the things that could happen. Just don't let any of this take you out of your game. You go. I've seen you do A, B, and C. If we're playing Japan, don't go and do D. Just keep doing A, B, and C. We might hang with them. We might not. They may be, who knows? Because even if all the rankings say they're 1 and you're 99, still got to play the game, boys.
True. It's never the best team that wins. It's always the team that plays the best that wins.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's my main takeaway, is just, instead of letting it go or only addressing it, say, during the game or after the game, you can anticipate. You can also be ready in the moment, pre-game, mid-game, post-game, and then also afterwards, because all of this stuff, when you inject adrenaline into dudes that are fairly new to testosterone, it's a dangerous mix, and you turn into a different person. I give you one more example really fast. I had a kid who was, when I was coaching in Bridgeport, he was, one of our younger pitchers, and he started for us. So 4 days out of 5, he was a laid back, really fun, cool guy, just whatever. And then on game day, he gets all like wired with it, and and I know, because I've, again, having been through the whole drill, is that when you get to game day and it's your start, you're pumped up with adrenaline, you're all hyped and all this. And I went out and I was walking out to the mound one game. He was giving up a couple of hits, and I walked in and I said something that was on the like a little joke to kind of lighten the mood, because you could tell he was just like getting all raged and drawn in or whatever. And so I just cracked a small joke, and he goes, "You coming out here to be funny? The dugout's right over there." It's like completely different than his normal personality, like total Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type thing, to the point where the next day he came up to me and was like, "Hey, coach, I'm really sorry about what I said that time. I didn't, he was all nervous about it, like I was somehow offended." And I was like, "It's all right, baby."
Yeah.
It's like, hey, that's I know how it goes, man. So
Yeah.
and again, if you as a coach take that stuff and deal with it the wrong way, then your players are going to fall apart behind you. Because if I'm all hyped up on adrenaline and don't know what I'm saying, and I say something to my coach that's offensive or wrong or mean or whatever, what have you, because I'm in the moment and I don't know, I'm so hyped up, and the coach is like, bullshit, and gets mad and gets in their face and escalates, that's to nobody's advantage.
Yeah.
But if you have a coach who's like, hey, it's okay, baby, it's just, then if you have somebody who's leading you in a coaching sense to say it's okay, then you're like, oh, good, now I don't have to think about that, I can get back in my game, go about my business. So
That's like the Navy SEALs. They say the leader's job is to instill calm. In times of chaos, the leader only has one job: instill calm. And that's a great way to do it right there. It's okay.
Exactly.
It's okay, baby. Whatever you
Yeah.
want to say. But yeah, instilling calm is huge, especially in those moments. So just to wrap this up, like if people want to reach out to you for anything, where can they reach you at?
Yeah, well, they can go to my website, The Way of Baseball. They can go on there and see a nice page of me pitching, and it says this is under construction and it'll be ready very soon, which it will be, but it's a project. And the email address is just pat@thewayofbaseball.com.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, Pat, for
Yeah,
getting
thank
on
you.
here. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was
I
fun.
had a good conversation with you.
Yeah,
And
this is something, clearly we both got a passion for, and can keep this going even further into the night if we wanted to, right?
guaranteed. I was like thinking, and we should get on the phone again and talk about what happens when you're on the other end of the stick. Instead of like being overmatched, what if you're the person that's like completely undermatched? That's a whole nother conversation that I think.
Oh, if you're playing a team that you're supposed to beat them really bad, and
Yeah, like what do you
yeah,
do
yeah,
then? That's a whole nother psychological facet of the game right there. So
yeah, I know. I'm already starting to think about that now, because I mean, I spent so much time, and when you get to a level where you consider yourself as a professional, then there's a connotation with that comes along that says, all right, if you're professional, it's like, I don't give a shit who's standing at the plate. I'm just gonna, and again, we go back to whatever analogy you want. It's like, well, I have four aces in my hand and a two. Well, I'm not gonna throw the two out there, even if you're playing or if I have a three and you got a two, I'm still gonna throw my ace on top of you, because I ain't gonna, I'm gonna,
you're gonna bring
I'm
it. You're a
I'm gonna do.
professional.
This is what my game is. So maybe
Hmm.
that's part of the preparation and the
Figuring out
professionalism.
what your game is.
Yeah, like your golfer friend too. It's like he. I'm sure that if he's thinking in that realm of competition, or if he's, I don't know what level he was, but
Pretty
you
high
got,
amateur.
yeah, if you're a high amateur, at some point you got to say, I know how to hit a golf ball. I don't care if I'm hitting a golf ball at Augusta National or at you know the municipal course down the street with a fivesome of slow players in front of me. it's just doing this, you know, and it's like,
Simple.
yeah. So at some point when you get to that point, you're going, and I think it also you get that level of professionalism coming from just the amount of time that you have done that in different scenarios and different situations, and you're just like, okay, well, maybe today I'm, playing in the rain. Well, I know I just like to play in the rain, and I'm going to do what I need to do to play in the rain.
Hmm.
Or I'm going to, play against Tiger Woods, or if I'm playing against the dude that's ranked last in the tour or whatever, I'm still going to go and hit the ball towards the green and try and make a good putt.
Hmm.
So
So true. All right, man. Well, I gotta go, but I will talk to you soon. We'll definitely be in contact here
yeah, we
shortly.
can we can do this again if it helps you out. However you
Yeah,
want to
I'm
play it.
I'm down. We'll get something on the books. I'll shoot you an email.
Yeah, I mean, and this is also the kind of thing too that would be suitable, that taking this